Now, George Glynos is in. He is the Managing Director and Chief Economist of ETM Analytics. And we're going to start off with a quick game of Throwback Thursday with George. For those of you on social media, you know that every Thursday around the country, everybody posts a picture of what they've done in the past. Now, here's a picture we'd like to throw back at George. He shared this graph with us sometime last year.
It was a year ago, April.
A year ago last year. And he was talking about Greece's government budget expenditure to GDP. And lots has happened since then, and most notably the election earlier this year.
That's right, George. I think this graph, more than anything, said about austerity that was being imposed on Greece, expenditure going down as a proportion of their GDP.
Yeah.
What's happened to that graph since?
Well, I mean, that graph said 1,000 words. It said that whilst austerity was painful, that in fact there were some meaningful steps being made to try and shrink government to a size that the underlying economy could sustain. And they had made some tremendous progress to the point where the primary budget deficit had swung into a surplus, the current account had swung into a surplus, GDP was swinging back into positive territory, so they were ending a 6-year-long recession. Things were looking a lot better than they were. And right at the 11th hour, the electorate went and voted in a new government that came in with new ideas and wants to restructure everything. And it's just put the brakes on it all. So we're back to square one. We're back to negotiating. We're back to 11th hour brinkmanship type stuff, and it just hasn't been constructive, not in any way.
So today is supposedly a very important day because this is where we see the first step of commitment from Greece, 450 million euros being said to be paid back by the IMF. Is this a test that has been now clinched to say Greece is in, it's the first payment, it's done?
No. No, I'm afraid it's not like that. In fact, I read a great quote today that said, you know, this was tantamount to a household paying for its electricity bill. There's still many more payments that have to come before the end of the month. In Greece's case, they've got to find another 5.5 odd billion by the middle of July. Now, for any economy, that wouldn't really be a problem, but Greece can't tap the debt markets because investors don't trust it, and even if it could, it would be borrowing at levels of 10.5%, which is just purely unsustainable for an economy that's got a debt burden as high as Greece's. So quite simply put, they can't go to the debt market, so the only thing that they can rely on is going for bailout funding.
So 450 million euros sounds like a lot, but when you say several billion, it looks very small, as you say.
Yeah.
I was going to say, what's the catch here? You've said what the catch is, but we've seen rapprochement with Russia, Putin and the Greek leader sitting together. Where does Greece, how does it maneuver out of this?
I mean, I think Greece is trying to show that it's got friends other than just Europe that it can tap. The problem is Russia is not a great friend to have right now because Russia's got its own economic problems and certainly can't be affording to bail out Greece at this particular point in time, even if it were for a swap out for certain assets. So I think Greece really does need to go back to the negotiating table. The government is going to have to swallow its pride and go back to a lot of what had been promised originally.
Let's go back to the political implications, because swallowing their pride also means going back to the electorate and saying, maybe some of the promises that we put on our election campaign boards are actually not going to happen.
But how can they do that?
But you see, now this is exactly the problem. Now, whose problem is that really? I mean, because you've got many electorates throughout the Eurozone, and you can't elevate Greece's electorate above all the others. All the other 18 countries that are going to be contributing to this bailout have their own electorates, and their own electorates are saying, we don't want to be throwing good money after bad, especially if Greece is not going to cooperate. So the Greek politicians need to be careful about promising things that they practically can't implement, which is exactly what's happened in this case. And so ultimately, I think, if we go back to a referendum or there's a big internal ructions that manifest in Syriza as the party that's currently leading Greece, well, so be it. It's going to happen because promises were made that simply weren't implementable.
Quick final yes or no answer. Will Greeks have to leave the Eurozone?
I don't know that they necessarily have to leave the Eurozone. If they towed the line, they would probably squeak through. What will happen is that there's going to need to be a significant restructuring of their debt. to make it more plausible. And Greece is going to have to come to the realization that in order to survive, they are going to have to produce significant budget surpluses to start paying down some of that debt.
Sounds more like a no than a yes. That was George Glynos from ETM Analytics. Thanks, George.